It's time for another fireside chat here at NodeConf 2023, NodeConf EU. I'm Cody Zuschlag, Developer Relations Engineer at Nearform, and today I'm so pleased to be joined by my special guest, Josh. Josh, tell us your name and your title, what you do.
Hi everyone, I'm Josh Goldberg. Thanks for having me. I'm a full-time independent open source maintainer, which means rather than work for any specific company, or in my case, any specific project, I bounce around on the internet and work on projects that I find useful and interesting. The main project I work on is TypeScript ESLint, the tooling that lets you run tools such as ESLint Prettier, the JavaScript ecosystem, on TypeScript code. I'm also the author of Learning TypeScript, the book, and a Microsoft MVP.
So Josh, is this your first NodeConf EU?
Yeah. Yes. It's my first time in Kilkenny, second time in Ireland, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, and so how's the conference going for you so far?
It's been great. This is one of, if not the highest concentrations I've ever been in or near of people who work on Node or in TC39 or anything like that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, it was so amazing. The first day, I remember there was questions from the crowd to the presenter, and there was like people from TC39, from the technical steering committee, getting up and answering the questions, and it was like live decision making happening in front of our crowd at a conference. It was such an amazing atmosphere. So, Josh, tell me a little bit about you, and I'm thinking about your journey into open source because, as I understand, it's been a long journey and just really exciting stuff, is what I've understand so far. So, tell me a little bit about your open source journey.
Sure. It's funny referring to it as a long journey. I was talking at breakfast with someone who has been doing it for 35 years, which is older than me. But I've only been doing it for about a decade or so.
That's a long journey. I'm put that in the long category.
I'll take it, yes. I started open source by accident because GitHub was free code hosting for this pet project of mine called Full Screen Mario. Okay. Which was it was eventually taken down by Nintendo. I'm very proud of that legal notice, the DMCA.
Oh, because I had Mario in the name. Yeah. Oh, okay, or Super Mario, okay.
Yeah, it was a full implementation of the original Super Mario Brothers in JavaScript. Wow. This was when people called it HTML5, like that was a new exciting thing.
Yeah, it was exciting, yeah.
I started working on it in 2012, went viral in 2013, taken down a month later. So that was my introduction to people might look at your code and not violently attack you. Like I think for a lot of people, it's very scary to put your stuff out there, put yourself there. Yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah, that feeling of maybe people are going to critique your code, but we all do that, right? Like if I look at my old code, I'm usually disgusted, right?
If you're not disgusted by your code 2 years ago, you know.
Yeah. So that's how it started. So what was the next step on the open source adventure?
A few things. I had an internship at a lab that used Drupal, or had me set up Drupal for their website. That's a great project. I also did more and more work, mostly as a user at first, of linting because my code was terrible, and linters were very useful in helping me learn and fix it. Eventually, I started working at Microsoft. In part, I got the internship there because of Full Screen Mario. Okay. And then while at Microsoft, I did more and more with TSLint, which was the standard TypeScript linter at the time.
And so what was your position at Microsoft? A developer? Okay.
Yeah.
And working on TSLint for TypeScript. Okay.
In my spare time. My
spare time. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I'm always very careful. I occasionally accidentally describe myself as like a member of the TypeScript team, which is confusing to people because I work on a project now called TypeScript ESLint, which is neither TypeScript nor ESLint. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
So, okay, on the side, working on TS ESLint, and what did that evolve into?
So first there was TSLint, which eventually died.
Yeah.
There's no human can keep track of all this.
The joke that you made just threw me off completely.
I'm sorry, this is bad interviewee technique that I'm giving here. Let me just confuse you as much.
You're doing well.
Thanks. So TSLint was a project I neither created nor was the lead maintainer on, but I joined on as a maintainer. And then a few months later, they announced it was getting killed in favor of TypeScript ESLint.
Ooh, okay. So, describe a little bit that experience, like becoming a lead maintainer on a project. Like that has to be a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure, but yet something to be really proud about. So I'm really curious on a personal note, like how did you feel about that? And then to have a project be killed, is I think was the words that you used. Yeah, tell me about that on a personal level. What's that like?
It's bittersweet.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to never have a strong personal attachment to TS-Lint. It was run by a company called Palantir. One of the reasons why TS-Lint was killed was because Palantir is quite a negative association for many people.
Okay.
The main reason why was that it was duplicated effort. There was TS-Lint and ES-Lint at the same time.
Right. Okay.
But there were many community members who were not okay with that association. But the real benefit was, and I agree with this, that if we merge everything into ESLint, make ESLint extensible for languages such as TypeScript, that's a much more unified, strong path forward for the community.
Sure.
So that's the sweet part of it.
Yeah, it's for a good cause to
Yeah.
unify, maybe.
Yeah. The bitter part was that, this was my first big open source project I was participating in.
Yeah, and to be the lead maintainer.
I was sorry, I keep misphrasing. I was a junior maintainer on TS-Lint.
Still maintainer, yeah.
Joined on. And then a single digit number of months later, like a small amount of time later, I was killed. But I think it gave me a very good condensed view of the life cycle of an open source project. I got to join on, I rehabbed it. It wasn't well maintained at the time. There just was not a lot of dev time for it. So I did a lot of work with the issue backlog and all this. And then I got to have the actual pleasure of killing a project to won't fix 500 issues and.
Yeah. Oh wow. And like the repository was archived on GitHub and oh wow. Oh, that is interesting because I think so much when we think about getting involved with open source, we want to get involved in a really vibrant, large project used a ton. And we don't think about all the other projects that come and go, just like so much what we do in this industry, right? Like it's temporary. And to see the life cycle. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, and so now where are you with open source?
Sure. I'm one of the maintainers on TypeScript ESLint, which is the tooling that enables tools such as ESLint and also Prettier to work on TypeScript code. This is another project that I am not the creator of. I just joined on after it got popular. Which I really like. I like joining a project, seeing how it works in the ecosystem, what I can do to contribute to it.
Yeah.
And unlike when I was at Microsoft or later Codecademy, I'm now a full-time open source maintainer.
Okay.
I realize that the work in open source is the most exciting part of my professional life, out of all the many exciting parts.
I love that. Yeah.
I've just been doing that for a little while.
So for if there's other folks that are working in that domain, if I can ask this question, like, do you have like donations or you're a sponsored open source maintainer, sponsored open source contributor? Is that kind of how that works? I'm curious if people want to follow in those footsteps.
Do I get paid?
Yeah.
Is there money? Do I have a home? Food on the table?
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. It's the most common question, and for good reason. There's a real problem in the industry that open source is very difficult to make a full-time, role out of. Right. It's difficult to do at all for many people. Who has the time and energy after work? You've been coding all day, screaming about bugs in production, and now you're just going to do that some more?
Yeah, and have people scream at you in public about bugs.
Yeah, let me get more of that.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of upsides to it, right? Like it's great experience. I'm learning a lot. Yeah. I get to work on tooling that is useful for bajillions of hours of work for people. And then the pay is a downside. I was making, 6 figures USD 3 years ago, and now I am proud to have surpassed New York City minimum wage over the summer through individual and project
milestone in your open source career. So it's not easy, right? But it's a passion. It sounds like, oh, that's really admirable. But now here you are at NodeConf EU, Kilkenny, Ireland, in this amazing castle hotel that we're hosting the conference in. Tell me a little bit about your workshop, because I know you had a really amazing workshop. How long was the workshop, and what was the topic?
It was scheduled for an hour and a half. It was actually an hour and a half plus 6 minutes. I went slightly over. Sorry to all the attendees who lost 6 minutes.
Their coffee break.
It was called, it was a verbose title. It was Floating and Syncing Promises, Let's Fix Your Broken Async Code. Floating promises is a terminology that actually comes from back in the TS-lint days. There was a lint rule for this.
Yeah.
If you create a promise in JavaScript, so for language agnostic terms, some asynchronous task, let's say, or a future, and you don't handle it, if you don't await it, put it in a variable, dot catch something.
But your function return in the project is, the promise, is floating at that point.
Floating off into the distance.
But it's still there is the thing that people don't realize.
And until a couple node-made versions ago, that would just cause an unhandled promise exception. Now it's a handled promise exception. I'm using the wrong terminology.
So you add a handler to catch those at some point.
But even if Node can handle an unhandled promise exception, that's still a likely potential sign of an application fault. You started some task, surely you'd like to know whether it succeeded or rejected, right? So it's that idea. First, we built up callback hell to promises to async awaits.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
And then we looked into things such as floating promises, like how it goes wrong and how you can detect them with TypeScript ESLint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of my favorite linter errors. Do something about this promise.
Do something.
Return it or await this. It's often like we do a lot of front end development, so lots of times the end of the function is calling an asynchronous function, and that's all it's doing in a handler. Personally, me writing the code, I don't care about the result because, well, in front-end development, you're going to get eventually those will show up in the console output. But on Node.js, it's a little bit different. Are you going to see those console outputs? Is anybody looking at those? So one of my favorite error messages. So was the project, the workshop, was it a success? Did you you feel like people gained some insight into why this is important and how they can think about that differently in their code?
I think so. I'm naturally a very shy, bashful person, which is in sharp contrast to how I act in public. And once in a while it comes out, like when people ask me how a workshop went. Objectively, I think it went well.
That's all that matters. But
but I'm scared to say that.
Good.
But no, I think we did a good job collectively in the room. It was very participatory, hands-on, asking the crowd of explaining how we got from hell to, microphone. Explaining how we got from callback hell to async await, and then using no floating promises, no misused promises is the other lint rule that's really useful here.
Yeah.
I had a good time, and I think people got stuff out of it.
So for anyone watching this video who wants to get more involved in open source, wants to get involved in open source projects, is thinking about giving back to the community, whether that's in their free time or eventually as a full-time open source role, what kind of advice could you give that developer, whether they're a senior developer or a junior developer or someone just thinking about tech? So you don't have to be a developer to be involved in open source either, I guess is another good point. What kind of advice could you give somebody who's thinking about that?
Thank you for asking. It's a great question. I'd say a few things. For starters, think about why you want to do it. There are many good potential reasons. You want the notoriety, you want to learn, you want to work with cool people, you just think it's fun. Like whatever the reason is, think about why and try to optimize for that. Try to find projects that are relevant and or useful and or interesting to you. For example, I started working on TS-lints because at the time I needed linting for TypeScript code, and I liked that. That's not for everyone.
Something relevant, I like that.
Yeah. It's okay to learn the hard way in public. I mean, most people I talk to who have tried sending, let's say, a pull request are the big reason why they don't or take a long time to do it is because they're scared that the code's not going to be perfect, that they're going to embarrass themselves. Yeah. It's better to have bad code. The worse the code is in the pull request, the more the maintainer can then help you. Yeah. And it's helpful for them to know what are the parts of the repository that are hard to contribute to.
And aren't clear maybe in their issues or in the contribution process. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I love working, and I think a good maintainer in an open source project should at least be willing and able to work with people who are very junior, very not into this by default.
I love that, and I think that's, having done a lot of software development, don't be scared of the feedback on or the code review. It's positive for everybody involved, right? Yeah. Oh, what a great point. So Josh, thank you so much for being here. This is amazing. So glad you're here. So excited about your workshop. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This has been a fantastic time.